Welcome to a world where particles, vibrations, and light collide, a place where leading industry experts and healers come together to discuss controversial topics that will challenge your beliefs and expand your mind. From quantum physics to metaphysics, no topic is off limits, but this is not your typical podcast.
And that's what's so critical. What you're thinking is still going inside of your body. Just because you don't say the words doesn't mean that it's not so, because you still think, right? And so we've gotten to the point where, well, as long as I keep my mouth shut, I'm okay. No, you're not. You're still storing up your body. You are still putting emotions in your body because of your need to be right. And if we have no right or wrong, then what is? And that's all there is, right? It's either energy or it's not. Whether you're speaking the words, whether you're thinking the words, whether you're thinking it, still matters.
It's a show guaranteed to make you question your assumptions and push you to expand your horizons. For those who are already fascinated or passionate about the work of Patti Conklin, this show will give you an inside look into the mind of one of the industry's most renowned figures in vibrational mediation. With over 28 years of experience and a long list of big-name collaborations, Patti's insights and perspectives will inspire and challenge even the most seasoned practitioners. And if you're the skeptic who doesn't believe in vibrational mediation, this show is for you. Healers, doctors, and scientists are just a few of the professions represented by our fascinating visitors that bring their unique perspective to every episode. Join us on this journey into the world of healing within and adventure inside. Our mission is to inspire, challenge, and enlighten our audience with thought-provoking conversations and fascinating guests from a wide range of fields who can shed new light on important issues facing society today. Join us for each episode if you're ready to explore and learn about the latest developments at the intersection of cutting-edge science, spirituality, and self-improvement. Enter a world where waves, particles, and light all meet. Enter the world of healing within and adventure inside.
Hi, everyone. This is Patti Conklin, and you're joining me for another episode of Healing Within and Adventure Inside. And thank you so much for being a part of the show today and being here and listening to the wisdom of my two guests who are just amazing individuals. Brother Paul Quenon, see if I pronounce that right.
That's right.
And Brother Paul is entered the Trappist Abbey at Gethsemani, Kentucky in 1958 at the age of 17. And we're going to talk to him a little bit about the monastic life. And his co-author in some of his writings is Judith Valente. And Judith has been a finalist for the Pulitzer Prize in Journalism twice and is the recipient of many awards for her coverages of faith and culture on national PBS. Former staff writer for the Wall Street Journal and the Washington Post. You two have such interesting, diverse backgrounds, and I thank you so much for being a part of today's show, and welcome. My viewers, I know, are going to love this episode. So Judith, Brother Paul, thank you so much. And Brother Paul, let's start with you. 1958, 17. What took you into that path of becoming a monk?
Well, I attended a Catholic school all the way up through high school. And that didn't particularly attract me to the priesthood or the monastic life. But at a certain point, at my mother's instigation, I began reading the Imitation of Christ, which is a devotional book of the 12th Thomas à Kempis, the Devotio Moderna of the 15th century, 14th, 15th century. And it kind of set up a dialogue between Christ and the soul. And I just sort of got into that dialogue and began to realize there's more going on here than just saying words. I really began personally praying at that point. And I found that love is available. It's it's immediately available. You don't, as a high school, you have to think you have to look here and there and elsewhere to get love. And this is at the beginning. And I said, well, where do you find a place where you can abide in that love? And well, the monastery is such a place. And of course, the Imitation of Christ extols monastic life. And well, I thought, I wonder if there's any monasteries in the United States. And then I read the sign of the Imitation of, pardon me, the Seven-Story Mountain by Thomas Merton, who entered Gethsemani. And I said, well, at least there's one monastery in the United States. So I wrote a letter, and here I still am.
Wow. What did your parents think?
Oh, they, well, of course, my father had passed away already, but mother, she was kind of reticent about it. She wasn't all that gung-ho about it because I was so young. I was just 17, finishing up high school. And I think the only reason why she let me come eventually was because she thought I would come home eventually. Now, my older brothers and sisters, they were college graduates or in college, and they were dead. Well, they were opposed to it, or they seemed to be. Later on, they said, well, they were so concerned because I was so young at the time.
Yeah, but a good decision for you personally.
Well, I've never really regretted it. Well, I guess if perseverance is any sign of a true vocation, which is not necessarily so, I'm still here. So it must be a good thing.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. And Judith, talk to us about your career. What got you from A to B? Because you've had quite a career.
Well, I always wanted to be a writer, and I looked upon journalism as a way of earning a living by writing. And so I became a journalist and was hired by the Washington Post at the age of 21, which is pretty unusual. And of course, that wasn't a big enough paper for me. I had to find a bigger paper to work for. So then I went to work for the Wall Street Journal. And I worked for them in the London and Chicago bureaus. And it began to dawn on me. I was by then, when I went to work for the Journal, I was by then in my 80s, that I wasn't showing up for my life. I was showing up for work every day. And in fact, I remember a moment in the London bureau when I realized I had to change my life, because I would come in at 9 o'clock in the morning, and I had this desk by a window that overlooked St. Paul's Cathedral in London. And I would come in at 9 o'clock in the morning, and then at some point I would look up out the window, and it would be dark outside.
Yeah.
And the day had passed, and I missed it.
Yes.
And I began to realize I was missing my life as well. And that's around the time I began to kind of get serious about what really mattered to me in life. What did I really want to do with, as Mary Oliver says, my one wild and precious life?
Right.
And so I went back to school. I went back and I got a master's in fine arts and creative writing, because poetry had always been my first love. I published my first collection of poems, which Mary Oliver happened to select for an award. And then I published another collection of poems. And meanwhile, I went to work for PBS TV, and PBS sent me, I was a faith and values reporter, to the Abbey of Gethsemani, where this gentleman lives. And it was an article, was a program about the 40th death anniversary of Thomas Merton, the famous author who inspired Brother Paul and inspired a lot of people to begin seeking a more contemplative life. And the two of us met at that time. We met in my professional capacity as a journalist, but we both realized we loved poetry. He had written several collections of poetry at that time, Brother Paul had. Nice. And I was a writer, and he told me something very interesting in that visit. He said that he wrote a 3-line poem, a Japanese haiku, every day as part of his meditation practice. And I kind of seized on that idea and thought, wow, that's a great meditative practice. That kind of situates you in the moment to write your 3-line poem every day. So he and I began exchanging 3-line poems, Japanese haiku, every day. And that became the basis of our book, our first book together, The Art of Pausing, Meditations for the Overworked and Overwhelmed. So I'll stop there. I could go on, but you probably have questions.
I do. What brought the two of you together to decide to write that book? I mean, was there something specifically going on in the world? Was it something that both of you recognized that people needed assistance on? What was that, Brother Paul? What was that for you in co-authoring that?
Well, you mean how to be?
Yes.
Rather than the
He's
art of
talking
pausing.
about the art of pausing.
Art of pausing, yeah.
Oh, well, the art of pausing, it's, I would send her my latest haiku, and then she would send me her latest haiku, and that went on for at least a year.
Uh-huh.
And then we began to realize, well, of course, Judith is the one that has so much initiative, She said, well, we got enough for a book here. And most publishers will say, well, books of haiku are not publishable, it's not interesting enough. But then she got the idea, well, if we accompany each haiku with a reflection, like just 2 or 3 paragraphs,
Yeah.
and maybe some photographs, it's, it's a book that people might take interest in. And so what got published is only about this big, and it became very popular. It makes a very wonderful gift book. I have one friend who bought 5 or 10 of those just to give away.
Yeah, it's
Wonderful
people
idea.
People buy it as a gift book because they know that people are needing to slow down. And the beauty of that book is that it has 3 paragraph reflections with each haiku. So you have the 3-line poem and then a 3-paragraph reflection with it. And I'm writing from the busy secular world, professional world outside of the monastery. Brother Paul is writing from within the monastery. So it's a lovely dialogue back and forth. And then there's a third author on that book named Michael Bever, who is kind of a Zen practitioner. And so you get his sort of Zen perspective in the book, in the reflections that he wrote. And, I've written 5 spirituality books. And The Art of Pausing is my bestseller. So, and it came out in 2013, and people are still buying it.
Wow, beautiful. I mean, you hit a chord there, obviously, in your writing and people's thoughts and so forth, and what they need for today. I know for me, it's a challenge to slow down and pause and just look at the water or look out my front door or whatever. It's a challenge, and yet something so necessary to balance my mind.
That's why I like to, when I guide retreats, I like to recommend writing the 3-line haiku as a daily meditation practice, because it forces you to slow down, to look and to listen for what will be those 3 lines for your day. So it automatically slows you down, and it's not a hard thing to do, to write 3 lines. 3 lines, anybody can handle it.
Of course, the important thing is to look and listen. Now, I find a lot of people write haiku about their personal life or their spiritual life or some spiritual experience they're going through. But it's in the nature of a haiku to be directed not to the subject so much as to what is presented to you from nature. And usually there's some nature imagery in it. And so, of course, the subjectivity gets into it. And a lot of times I find myself anthropomorphizing birds or animals as if they thought like human beings, but I keep in the background for the most part, not always, but
Yeah. And this is something you both still do every day?
I do, and I think Brother Paul does too.
well,
Yeah.
I've kind of slowed down. I don't know what's wrong with me right now.
Well, he goes through haiku dearths,
Yeah.
and then he revives it. So, and so do I. I mean, I go through periods where I don't write one, for a few days, and then I'm writing. But it's really good to have a partner to do this with.
Mm,
And that's what I recommend to people who come on the retreats, is to try to find a partner that you can do a haiku exchange with.
right,
Well,
right.
Judith, maybe that's my problem. I haven't been sending you things.
Well, you should start again.
Get back to it. Get back to it. Talk to me, Judith, about some of your retreats and guidance of those retreats. What are they like? What do you focus on?
I could give you some of the titles, which would give you the themes of the popular ones. I do one called "The Art of Pausing, Being Present to the Current Moment." I do one called "Becoming an Everyday Contemplative." Another one called "Maintaining a Contemplative Calm in a Chaotic World."
Hmm.
And those are really, and then another one that's come up because of what people they ask you to do.
Yeah.
Another theme that's come up a great deal is well, I titled it "Let Peace Be Your Aim: Strategies for Peacemaking in a World of Conflict." Because I mean, there's just so much conflict in our world, from the war in Ukraine and the mini wars elsewhere, to
Yes.
conflict within our government, conflict in our communities. I mean, it's really, we're in a very conflict filled period in our history, and you even hear people talking about a civil war, which
Yes.
simply blows my mind.
I
When
know.
I mean, how anybody can even want to speak of such a thing, and yet you hear it in the news cycle. And
Yes.
so retreats that help us to maintain a peaceful and contemplative attitude are things that people seem to want.
I think very much so. I mean, living here in Georgia, kind of ground zero, I think, in that Civil War talk. And I'm like you, it's like, how can you even think about that or think that somehow is going to be a solution to any of the conflict going on in the world? So it seems to be bombarding here. And
then you hear on a global level, Vladimir Putin talking about nuclear weapons and some of his members of his government. And that is adding to just a tremendous amount of tension from the global level on down, as you say, to what's going on in Georgia.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It just seems that we're in a time period in our lives where it's more prevalent for people, for whatever reason, to be not holding themselves personally responsible, just continuing the rhetoric without checking to see if it's true. And Brother Paul, in your area of Gethsemani, I get it right again? Wow, Kentucky.
Right.
In living the monastic life, I mean, I don't know if this is a prevalent question or not. What is the core basis of being of service as a Trappist monk?
Well, the goal of life is peace, inner peace, peace with God, peace with one another in the community, and of course with the world.
Yeah.
So that is not secondary. That's very, very much in the forefront.
Yeah.
And so you almost it's built in to the extent that the practice of silence is very prominent, and the fact that we have some separation from the world, We don't interact with the world so much one-on-one, face-to-face.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is that we do have the media, and in our day, 21st century, we have access to the web and journalism. We don't watch television though,
Mm-hmm.
although I can find TV programs on the web.
Yeah, that's true.
But, that's my own choice if I like to keep up with what's going on. And it's really built into our structure. And I think it works. I don't feel so menaced as people outside the world do.
Yeah.
And that's a sad thing to have to live under that kind of a, dread. People are full of fear. I mean, it's an increasing thing. The problem with, as Thomas Merton said, the root of war is fear. And you start tracing down the various issues of conflict now, you'll find at the bottom of somebody's really afraid of somebody else.
So true. So true. I mean, fear just seems to be prevalent with everyone that I speak with workshops that I'm teaching, fear. And I just keep going back to reminding people that for me, fear means forgetting every available resource. And that's that peace of God that's inside of us. And if we just go within and find that peacefulness and that love, then the rest of the world doesn't seem so scary. And just help them stay in that space. Judith, when you're teaching your workshops and your retreats, are you seeing an increase in fear amongst your attendees?
Oh yeah, I think fear and tension, just overall worry and tension and unease. And I forgot to mention, overlaying all of this is the pandemic, which is still very much with us. And so it's a very anxiety prone time. And I think in a sense, and Brother Paul has talked about this in some of his comments that he's made on the pandemic, that the pandemic has forced us to look at what are our non-negotiables and what really matters to us. And it's forced us to learn how to be alone with ourselves, because for so long we weren't able to have the contact that we had with other people, with big groups. So we had to look inward. And I think he would say, and I've heard him say, that that's a good byproduct, if you will, of the pandemic.
Yeah. Brother Paul, talk to me about that.
Well, the thing about the pandemic, it has brought the best out of people and has brought the worst out of people.
Yeah.
And it kind of all depends on how willing are you to face solitude, and to some extent to endure solitude. And the problem with solitude is that it takes a certain amount of getting used to.
Yeah.
Unless you're just kind of one of those loners who kind of grew up that way, and to some extent I was like that, not entirely though. But the root of that problem is yourself. Are you able to live with yourself? Do you know what the ultimate purposes in your life are? What is it you're called to? Are you really alone in that solitude? I find myself less alone when I'm in solitude than otherwise.
Yes.
Because there is that, as I said, that immediate love, which is always accessible, but we don't always access it for ourselves when it's there.
Yes. Yes. I would think also it would in moving into solitude, and let's talk about the pandemic, when people were forced into this solitude of whether or not they were going into solitude and staying in solitude based from fear versus a willingness to be alone with themselves. And I would think the dynamics would be really quite opposite depending on how they went into the solitude of just being forced or choosing to be at home during the pandemic or working from home, and the fear of going out, and how much fear is still there with the pandemic. And Judith, the question to you would be, are you finding people more at peace in their solitude than 2019, or is there still such a fear factor in their isolation that it's a negative for them?
I think a couple of things have happened. I think people have found new ways to be community. Brother Paul didn't mention this, but one of the great strengths and one of the appeals of monastic life is that it is a community. You have this strong community, and the monks exist for each other as well as God. I mean, they exist to build this strong community that they're in, and that's across the board of any monasteries. And so what was heartening to me was to see how people found other ways to be community. They couldn't meet with their regular book group or their regular luncheon group or their card playing group, and they found a way to do it on Zoom. They found a way to do it electronically. I found, a woman on my retreat wrote up this little list of what she does every day. And one is, how am I reaching out to others? Which is something she really didn't think about before.
Right.
And then you hear people saying, gee, I never thought about the mailman before. The mailman was one of the only people you saw every day when we had the lockdown.
That's right.
I never thought of the UPS guy. I never thought of the people who stock the shelves at my supermarket. And so we had a different type of awareness that I hope that we don't lose.
Yeah.
When as things gradually sort of pick up and you don't have to stay home as much anymore. One thing that is disturbing about what happened in the pandemic is that somehow we lost a sense of the common good.
Yes.
And I saw this. I spent 3 months on a writing project in Italy at the end of 2021 when Omicron was raging over here. It was not raging in Italy. You know why? Because 80% of the Italian people got vaccinated. 100% were willing to wear masks indoors and outdoors.
Yes.
And they didn't question that because they knew they were doing it for Nonna and Nono, for Grandma and Grandpa and Mama and Papa. They knew they were doing it for other people. And here in this country, we somehow got on this track that it was somehow eliminating our individual rights.
Right.
And what got lost was we had to think about the common good at that moment.
Yeah, I totally agree. And we still are not back to a point of looking at the common good, it seems like.
Yeah. How often do you hear that term, the common good?
Yeah. True.
Well, Brother Paul and I wrote another book called How to Be, based on our letters to each other over the years. And in the book, we talk about something that Saint Ulrich of Rivaux, who lived in the 13th century, Brother Paul?
12th century.
12th century.
12th century. Wow.
He talks about something called benevolencia, as being the basis. It means literally goodwill in Latin, benevolencias, as being what should be the basis of all relationships, that you are concerned about the goodwill of the other person.
Yes.
That's the basis of relationship, not what can you do for me, and don't tread on my rights and I won't tread on your rights, but what can we do for each other?
Yes, yes. And it's so important. It's critical to, how we experience life. And I agree somehow. I mean, I think it started before the pandemic. The pandemic probably brought it out a lot more. But remembering a childhood where we were all incorporated within our little town, that every mother had the right to get after all of us kids when we were not acting appropriately, or getting in the mud puddles, whatever. But I think that coming back around to being, what's the title of that book again, Judith?
How to be a monk and a journalist reflect on living and dying, purpose and prayer, friendship and forgiveness.
Wow.
But I think we can get back to it, Patti. Don't you think we can get back to that? I feel like the monastics, like Brother Paul, who live in community, they can be a prophetic voice.
Yes.
To all of us.
Yes. I do believe we can get back there. And I think we need to get back there, that being aware of other people's needs. And that's not to say we lose ourselves. It just means that I just have this thought of you do what's right, and what's right is making sure and connecting with other people, making sure that they're okay, and the common good of everyone. Brother Paul, I'm going to let you close us out. What are your wise words for this episode and where we are today as a world?
Well, I have a older brother who was very much part of the capitalist system, and he described it as enlightened mutual self-interest. Enlightened self-interest. And that is, you don't step on the other guy's foot, but really your ultimate concern is yourself.
Yeah.
And we need to reverse that, as we've already said, that the common good is the main. My welfare, the person is the most important thing.
Yes.
But the person is somebody who relates. The person has to be distinguished from the individual, who is distinct and over against other individuals. Whereas the person relates to community, the person relates to the whole. And that's our original state of being, is to be related to the whole, because in a sense we come from the whole. I wouldn't be at all in existence if it wasn't for just not my parents and grandparents and all the way up the line, but everything else in the cosmos. I mean, we're made out of cosmic dust, or we're made out of stardust, literally, carbon molecules. So it's nice to have that kind of lineage, isn't it?
Yes. Beautiful.
That's a beautiful way to remembering how we're all connected. We're all stardust.
We're all stardust. I love it. Thank you both so much, Judith Valente and Paul Quenon. Thank you so much, Brother Paul, Judith, for being a part of today's show, Healing Within, an Adventure Inside, and best luck to both of you.
Thank you, Patti.